Howdy, hackers, and welcome to another episode of FairLight TV. See this episode as sort of a follow-up to the one where Adam Trident and myself discussed the Victrix in a previous episode. Here, Adam takes the knowledge further, adds a new of the stuff that was invented in the last few years, and some of it actually invented quite long ago, but the new applications and, well, new ideas to build on old findings to make new effects on the C64. This is amazing stuff. Over to Adam Trident and Tricking the Vic even more.
Okay, so watch this. This is a completely new demo effect being displayed in 2025 on the Commodore 64 from the demo Codeboys and Ideas by Boost Design. And this is something that the designers of the Commodore 64 never thought would be possible. Here's another one from FairLight, the Trip 2025 again. This is on a Commodore 64 42-year-old computer that has no notion of hardware accelerated graphics. There is nothing like a scaling or zooming or anything built into the hardware. It's just pure, very simple graphics hardware. Actually, it wasn't too simple for its time, but for later time, definitely very simple CPU. Yet we can do things that was not thought to be possible. And today we're going to look at how this is done, plus a lot of more. And this is today a slightly different type of FairLight TV episode. I think normally it would be Bacchus sitting there talking. Now it's mostly me talking. I'm Trident. Bacchus is here listening. And we thought that we'd do it like this, where Bacchus, being a coder, you know how things are done. You know what's possible, what isn't possible. And I thought that would be a pretty fun way for me to just explain how these things work. We're going to talk about all the, everything behind the techniques behind what we're seeing, plus a lot more. You can be the stand-in for the audience. You can ask questions. You can interrupt me. You can, fill in whatever details that you think is necessary. But really, that's the kind of the general theme of today. And the cool thing here, which that I think is cool with the effects that we just saw and more to come, is that they are new. This is not a retrospective of how things used to be done or how they could be done back in the day, but really something new. This is something that happens now. This is new this year, last year, but we're going to look at how it relates to the things that we saw, 30 years ago too. We're going to go as far back as 1988 and really go through the kind of the development that led up to what we're seeing now here today. And
I need to say that I learned new stuff until like 1992, and I haven't learned a thing since. So that's where my starting point.
Well, this is going to be a world first. That too today, you're going to learn something for 35 years ago, whatever.
Yes, I'm so eager. Let's do it.
Oh, this is great. This is great because the real the real deal here, the basis of everything that we see is one register, D011. It is the Y scroll register, which I think is that the horizontal or vertical. I can't. I don't remember.
We messed that one up last time. Sorry, guys.
So, but it's the one that goes like this direction, Y, and it's an 8-bit register. You can do bunch of things with that, but we're not going to even use the 8 bits. We're not going to use more than 3 bits, really. Well, a few of the others too, but mostly 3 bits. And plus 2 other registers, really D018 and DD100 as well, to do what would be considered impossible, to stretch, squeeze, and zoom graphics on the C64. This is something that was not intended to be done by the hardware designers, never been part of any spec, as really about being, finding clever ways of doing that despite this. And we're going to look at things like what we're seeing on the screen here. These are demo effects from 2 years back up until recently. And we're pretty much going to go through all of these and talk about how they're done and what the techniques are, because it's basically is four fundamental techniques that underpin all of these things. They're the repeated character lines, which lets us do graphics but with no bad lines. It is to trigger a bad line every nth row, where n is between 1 and 7. Trigger a bad line every n rows, relax for 7 rows. And the fourth one is to trigger a bad line every nth row, but not always. So those are like the four fundamental tricks that we're going to use and look at today. Everything is based on D011. So just let's jump right into this. Like the basics are the C64 screen consists of two things. It's the border on the outside, and what's on the inside is the actual screen. Well, last time we talked about the border, how to open the border, get rid of that, and put sprites there. Today, we're not going to look at the border at all. We're just going to focus on what's on the screen itself. So this is either text mode, 40 by 25 characters, or bitmap mode, 320 by 200 pixels. Really, pretty much the same thing. The main thing that differs is where the pixels are stored in memory, where Vic reads the pixels and how the colors are combined.
Yep.
But pretty much the same number of pixels anyway. And let's just focus on like the first 16 or so pixels right up here, because it looks something like this. This is like the internal view inside of the VIC chip. To the left, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up until 15. Those are the pixel rows, like on the y-axis, moving downward. The green thing that we see, those are bad lines. And the bad lines there, well, they're called bad lines because they're not really bad, but normally the VIC chip and the CPU are in lockstep. So the VIC chip is doing one thing on the first half of the cycle, and the CPU does its thing on the second half of the cycle. Then they go back and forth. Except every now and then, the VIC chip needs to access more memory than usual. So it needs to access memory in both of these phases. And then it locks out the CPU, and that's what we call a bad line. So we lose 40 cycles on each bad line. So those are the top and the middle green lines here. What the VIC chip is doing here is that it's reading character pointers, colors pointers from memory. Those are like, that's what is doing, what is stealing those cycles. It's doing one read per cycle to get those. Actually, maybe it's 2 reads per cycle because they need to get both the colors and the characters, stealing the cycles from the CPU. So that's the kind of the basic. We know this from before. We've seen it and we've tested it. Every coder kind of knows this. But there's one thing more on this picture here. If we look down, so those are the bad lines. But over here, out onto the right, there is something that happens just inside the VIC chip that is not immediately visible to the user, to the coder, to the outside world, and it happens every 8th line. It happens the 7th line before a new bad line. And what the VIC chip is doing over there is that it increases its own internal counters. So it has a pixel counter counting the pixels from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it keeps another counter for the x-axis as well to really see what bits to put on the screen. So over to the right, right before the next bad line, it increases them. But it increases them in like a 2-step fashion. So it does one thing and then another thing a few cycles later. And that means that we as coders, we can actually interrupt that process, which leads us to our first trick, the repeated character lines. Now, this was something that we sort of touched on the last time we spoke over the 26 row thing and how to do that. So this is how it works. This is kind of the backstory to all that.
So we are actually on the last pixel on the screen. We're not doing this once the border is happening. It's even inside the screen, but only one pixel or one character. No, this is one pixel.
No, it's actually one character. It's actually a little more relaxed. I think you can have 4 different cycles that you can hit with this. So it's it's pretty lax. You can actually you don't need to be super precise on the cycles, but you
Yeah.
can hit it, and it's about the same place where you open the side border. Uh, so when you do this trick, you can't open the side border at that row because you need to write to D011.
So,
Uh,
and just for clarification then, so the horizontal ones, they are pixel row, whereas the
yeah,
vertical ones, that's a full character then.
yeah, something like that.
Okay,
It's
okay.
not just scale. I just kind of
Yeah.
sketched
Uh,
it out like this. So it's basically towards the end of the line before the border. And because what we do then is that we say to the Vic chip that, hey, that last line that you just drew, it was actually a bad line. And the Vic chip goes, okay, cool, because then I'm not going to do another bad line. I just did a bad line. But we do this right after the graphics counters have been updated. So what happens is that the Vic chip will keep displaying graphics, but it won't read a new bad line. So we're kind of stuck with the characters that we had last time. The last time we read a
mm,
bad line, we got a bunch of characters. We're stuck with them. If we're in bitmap mode, we still show pixels from the bitmap. So the bitmap will keep getting displayed, but the colors will be the same as the first line of colors. But in character mode, we still see the same characters being displayed on a row. So we need to do this every eighth line. Uh, Basically tell the Vic chip just before it gets to the next bad line, saying, hey, that was actually a bad line. And
mm.
the Vic chip says, hey, that was actually a bad line. And it will just keep going. We need to reset D011. So essentially what it means that we need to set D011 twice. So once we need to hit it here at this cycle,
Mm.
now we need to reset it sometime later. So it's kind of back to the same count. So in this case, the D011 would be the last three bits of D011 would be zero because of we see the bad line at the top. And then on pixel row 7, cycle 52 to 56, we set D011 to 7. So we tell the Vic chip that this was actually a bad line.
So, I mean,
And
that's the same as doing border opening. You set DO16 to something, and then you need to reset it. So you are
yeah,
basically normalized until you have the next lap.
exactly.
Yeah.
The only difficulty here is that we can't really reset it immediately because if we do that, we get a bad line on the next line. So we can't do that. But we need to do it sometime after the next bad line. So you can have like an interrupt happening every 4 lines or so and just kind of go back and forth
Okay.
uh, to this. And if we do this on text mode, it looks like this. And this may not look like much. Like, why would you do this? You just see the same characters row by row. Uh, and the reason why we do this in text mode is that we can still change the font, even though we get the same characters, because we just do that once.
Mm.
We can still change the font. So if we change the font here, we get something like this. Uh, we can't change the screen. If we change the screen, it doesn't really matter because we're not going to read any more bad lines. Uh, but we can change the font. So two things that this gives us. First, it gives us bad line free screen mode. So we can do time anything that we want to do for this. But also it lets us do large updates of the graphics by just changing those 40 bytes at the top.
Mm.
And we can get some pretty impressive effects just by doing that. So let me just show you here.
But
Here is
no,
a
no,
full.
do
Oh,
get
sorry.
back. I have
Okay,
to.
sure.
The audience has is representing a question here. So you are
Okay.
changing within the same font
Actually,
between capitals and small characters here, or
those are no, those are actually two different fonts. These are the two ROM fonts of the
mm,
C64 that we see here. The first one is the default one, and the other is the lowercase, uppercase
yeah.
version of the same font. So those are two fonts uh,
Okay, so
that
you
are
change DO18 here
yeah
on a regular basis, and you
yeah
can change it to. I mean, you can have more than two in the bank,
yeah
right?
exactly. You can have uh, if you take out all the fonts that are possible, you have something like 25, which means that you can actually do a full screen of graphics by changing one font per character row.
Okay.
And you fill up the entire memory,
Yeah.
but you get an interesting screen mode that lets you do things that would not be doable in a normal screen mode.
So, and you can
Because
also change DD00 here. So you can also change Vic Bank. So you have access to all the
exactly,
fonts within a bank and also in all the four banks here.
exactly, yes. And this is pretty, it's not even super critical in terms of the kind of the tightness of the code because you set the D011 at the edge of the border. You got plenty of cycles to set DD18 and DD100
Hmm.
before the next line starts. It's like 14 plus 7, so 21 cycles or so. So plenty of time
Hmm.
uh, to update that. And and this lets you do some very interesting things. And so this effect here is from the demo eyes. This is coded by me, by the way. So just so I mostly use my own because I know exactly how they work. But what we're seeing here is the screen mode, just the same characters being read at once, and then just changing the font down. And the picture here is 32 characters in width. And then there are 8 different rotations of this in memory, split over the 256 characters per line. So by just changing that first line,
Hmm.
we can get this full screen wobbly effect, which is just very, oh no, something else started. Just very cheap. No, not a lot of CPU time that gets into showing that effect. And let's go for the
Fantastic.
next one. Uh, Pseudo fisheye from the same demo. So this is for me, this is really a favorite effect. I really like this. Uh, so this is the picture is by Pal FairLight, and it's this pseudo fisheye thing. It's really, gets a feeling of being inside something and looks right at you. So really, I'm just gonna pause it right here. Effective, I think. And what we're seeing here is again a screen mode where you're repeating the character lines all the way down, 25 fonts, so every line that we can squeeze in. And the picture here is again 32 characters wide, and then there are 8 different versions of this with different height. So towards the edges of the screen, we show with like a larger version, and at the middle of the screen, we show the kind of default version.
Hmm.
So the effect is this kind of fisheye projection that can move very fast because all we need to do is really update 40 bytes at the top of the screen and then do the interrupt every 8th line. Uh, the drawback is that it uses everything, the full memory is full. There is nothing more that can be done really here. Everything's taken up by the picture.
Yeah,
Uh,
massive. Absolutely
yeah,
massive. Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talked about last time was doing the technically advanced stuff, and it's really technically difficult to do.
yeah,
But then you can't convert it into something that looks stunning, and then it feels rather pointless. It's a big
yeah,
waste of energy of doing something that's not really stunning to look at. But here, this is really
yeah,
converting into something that is really stunning to look at.
yeah. Because you have the full screen, like
Yeah.
everything is moving, and because it's so cheap to move things both, we can, by just updating those 40 bytes up there, we can move the entire screen like this, but we can also move the screen like that by updating the table of D018 and DD100 values, the ones that we set towards the end of the screen there every 8th line. And really, we just need to index a table, and we can move the entire screen up and down with no effort at all. And that's what so the next effect here is from the demo of the trip, FairLight 2025 Slinger Bobs, which really moves around on the screen like this, very quickly up and down and move around. So to make this work, and it really covers the full kind of screen as well. There's no black borders or anything. It's really just the full screen. And this is also is using the same technique, repeating the character lines to the right, uh, painting those mobs onto 25 different fonts, then indexing this table up and down to make them move very quickly. In this case, it also updates the color registers as part of the same interrupt code. So we get those very colorful uh, bobs on the screen.
So,
But really,
dear watchers, if you found that to be black magic and have no idea how what Adam just said compares to what you saw on the screen, then join me in that. I didn't get that at all. It looks fantastic, but how you get from that repeating the same 40 characters onto Bob's, I don't get.
yeah, there's more to it that you need to have. Yeah, I realize that this is like the picture of this how to draw an owl.
Huh?
And you draw some circles and they draw the rest of the fucking owl. And then there's
Uh,
this great picture of an owl that someone yeah. So it's kind of like that, yeah. And here's another one, 1337, using a similar technique or the same technique for just moving the screen up and down. Uh, but so there's plenty of time to do this dithering effect that goes on in the background here because the movement is really cheap. It doesn't cost anything. Just index a table and everything just moves up and down. It's all based on the same trick. You hit D011 every eighth line at the edge of the screen, update D018, DD00, and you're good. You have a
mhm.
screen mode that lets you do this.
Amazing.
So, yeah. That's the first. So that's the first trick. Now to the second trick here, which is kind of similar but also very different. And unlike the first trick, this does not require any kind of super tight timing at all. You can do this from a raster interrupt, just that you set with D012. No jitter things, nothing. But here's the thing. So we have again a similar like setup that we saw with the big kind of basic or the base Vic grid, except this is slightly different because you see the first bad line there. So that's at row 0,
Mhm.
but the next one is at row what would be row 7. So to get this, so we set D011. If it's D011 is 0 at the top, or the last 3 bits are 0, somewhere after this line, we set it to 7. So now the VIC chip, when it comes to number 7, it will say, hey, this was actually supposed to be a bad line. So I'm going to do a bad line right there. And a few lines later, we set D11 to 6. So now we're going to trigger another bad line, like 7 more lines below.
Mhm.
The only thing that doesn't happen here is over here because we never reach line 7. We never go as far as to say, I'm going to go and increase my counters. The VIC chip will never increase its counters.
Mhm.
It will start again. The new bad line will be just the same as the previous one. It will reread the same character pointers and it will restart with the same bitmap uh, pixel rows if we do this. So we just don't, again, if we compare this to this, what we saw, like the default Vic grid is that the little X's over
Mhm.
there that we just don't have. So the effect here is that we get re-showing the same battle. Yeah.
But you're shaving off the last pixel line here, so all the character lines would only be 7 pixel lines, 7 raster lines high, rather than the normal 8. But and you
Yes,
can shave off more, but that's not the
exactly.
intention here, or is that intention as
Well,
well?
it is it that is actually it is very much the intention because we can change how much of those pixels that we show. Now we show 7 pixels, but if we set D11 to a lower value, we can go
Mm.
as far as to actually show just one line per character.
And it's not
Uh,
arbitrary. You cannot arbitrarily show which pixel line you want. It's the first.
no,
You need to go from
exactly.
0 up until when you decide that that character line is no longer be shown, and then you start
Yeah,
basically a new character line.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yes. So there's no way to.
this one I understood.
Yeah. Excellent. But you make a real, very, very good point. We cannot decide what row to show. I mean, there are chips out there where you can tell the graphics chip, I'm going to show line 100, 101, 102,
Mm,
whatever. So you can do things like stretching it out is simply changing the index,
mm.
or you can flip the picture up and down, or you can do all sorts of tricks. We cannot do that with a big chip. The only thing that we can do is this. We can retrigger number 0 of every character row. So we get this. And if we do this, we can get something that looks like this. This might be a bit hard to see what's going on here, but this is essentially the same uh, character line that we saw before, but is now being the between 0 and 7, it varies and it moves. So that's where we see this kind of a stretchy style effect. I'm just changing the amount between each of these bad lines. But what we can do here is again we can change the font. Uh, so it might be maybe a little easier to see here, but probably not because it just looks like a some abstract thing. Uh, but the interesting thing that we can do things with this. Uh, so the first thing that just going to show here is from a demo called Demo Retox from 2024, where there is a squeezing scroll, and we are seeing the number of pixel lines between bad lines getting squeezed in. And in this case, it's also, I'm just going to stop here. And we see 7 pixels of each line. And then there is a blank character line in between. And then there is the next one. So in this case, I'm selecting D018 so that there is always a blank line in between. And the effect becomes pretty cool. It's kind of covering the text of, just about it.
Hmm?
And it's really based on this very simple principle of triggering a new bad line between 2 or 7 pixels down below, and then setting DO18 and the right moment. But I, I I actually haven't seen this particular type of scroll effect before. I'm sure there are plenty of examples out there. It's just that I never saw it. There are a bunch of similar things. People have been doing this with like a flee mode thing where you can trigger bad line every line, but I actually had never seen this particular one before. Uh, and the same demo also has another version of the same technique, but applied to large font steps. So we get this kind of, which looks like it's a stretchy scroller, but it's really a squeezy scroller. It's kind of squeezes together this font that we're seeing. Let's see if we can pause it. And so we see that there are graphics inside of these characters, and it just gets squeezed together by using this technique
Hmm.
because we can control how many pixels of each character line that we show, and then we can, for each character line, select a new font or a new screen to decide what to do. So kind of a simple way, but to get a very impressive result. Again, this was something that was never like intended by any designer of the chip. It was just there for us to play with. So let's see what the next one is. Oh yeah. So this leads into one of, for me, one of the coolest effects ever invented on the C64. It is the Graham zoomer. So the backstory here was a demo by Oxeron in 1995 called Parts that display this incredible. I don't know if you saw this, but it's this amazing distorter, squeezy picture, the one that we see on the left,
Hmm.
and that was just insane. No one had done anything like it. And a few months later, Dawnfall by Oxeron, again by Graham, had this incredible zooming Oxyron logo, colorful like crazy, full screen. And it was incredible to see this. Like, wow, this was something that no one had done anything like it. Uh, and I thought we'd just look at how that works to go through it because I think it's really, really cool. So the basis of this is that you have on the Y direction, we simply use this technique to trigger a new bad line. In its most outstretched form, the most zoomed in form, we have 7 lines between each bad line. And if we're gonna zoom in, we just decrease this by not like 6 bad lines or 5 or 4, but we really do it like 6.9, 6.7, so that we get a gradual
Mm.
change between 0 and 7.
They're not
Essentially
all
what
the
we're doing.
same. So you some of them would
Exactly.
go to 5 and some of them would stay on 6 and
Yeah.
then can also add a little bit of wobbly effect here, I guess. So
Yep. Definitely. By just changing those things there. And so here's what it looks like if you just see it on the basic screen. I'm not sure again if this is possible to see because it gets really messy with all the pixels,
yeah, we are
but
really
it's really
lucky
just
that most people are actually watching this on the PC or on a big computer. And our share of mobile viewers is less than I would say the average is. So I think most people
oh
would actually be watching this on a rather big screen.
yeah, well then maybe this will be visible.
Yeah.
Actually, you can have
Yeah.
the phone and like pull it up to your eyes maybe like that.
Yeah. We're all old, so do watch it on big screens.
So, but let's see. I have another one where we have the change the font because we do the same trick. So change the font. So this is uh kind of using the different fonts. So we can also change the screen, and we get this. This might be actually easier to see what's going on because we're now watching this kind of slanted pattern that gets moved up and down. And if you see this, I guess if you would be a designer of the chip and you'd see this, you say, hey, there's no way that that could be done. Like this is
Yeah.
not intended to be like that. But of course, you'd be able to figure out that, of course, you can trigger a bad line, you can do all that. So it's not super far-fetched, but just the visual effect of seeing this up and down is really uh, cool, very impressive. So, but that's one direction.
Mm.
And the other direction is the X direction is actually a lot more clever. Uh, so, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it through this explanation without getting you confused because it's not super easy to figure out. You kind of need to work your way through it to really figure it out. But this is the first, I think, version of this X flexor. So this is a part by Sound of Beyond Force released in 1992. Those two logos moving back and forth, squeezing together. And when you saw this the first time, I was like, what the? How is that even possible? Like crazy. Actually, this is from 92. That's when you stopped learning.
Yeah.
So maybe you learned this.
I think this was released after I stopped learning. So
The
isn't
late
this just
92.
having a number of animations and then showing which of the animations? No, no.
Not really. It's cleverer than that. And this is what Graham realized that you can combine this with the Y flexor
Mm,
that we saw to get this kind of full screen zoom. And actually, the way this works is that you have 4 versions of, or maybe 8 in this case because it's high res, but 4 versions of the whatever graphics that you want to show. So I'm showing it here as a like the FairLight logo, and you see the 4 versions are shifted 2 pixels or 1 pixel, one
yeah.
multicolor pixel each. And if we're gonna show a fully extended, like a fully normal version, we're just gonna pick characters from the first logo, and we get the first logo.
Mm,
That's fine.
mm,
But to show a slightly contracted version of the logo, we're gonna pick a character up here, and the next character, we're gonna pick one over here. So this one is shifted 1 pixel in.
mm.
And then we pick another one over here, which is shifted 2 pixels in, or 1 pixel from the last one. And then we take one here. So the effect now is that we have actually shifted this in. We have zoomed it in or zoomed it out so that we have a compressed version
Mm.
to show, which is so we can do this. Let's see if I have examples of this. So this is the basic screen with a X-gram zoomer, just kind of getting back and forth like this. And it's actually zooming in pretty nicely. You see that when you get to the most squeezed together mode, it actually starts to lose some, becomes kind of coarse and rough
Mm.
because we have that 4 8 pixel granularity here. We can't squeeze them inside each character. It's only at the edges that we actually squeeze them together. But for most purposes, this works really, really well. So let's see. Oh yeah, this is an example of that. But just how to use the text uh, being drawn using this technique. Get
Mm.
this really nice uh, squeezed together version of the text by just pulling it out using this technique. Here's one where it's just a logo wobbler. So there's no zooming. It's just taking out the various characters and you get this really wobbly effect. But you can see how it kind of goes in and stretches out a bit. And this is done by simply picking out pixel or certain
Mm.
characters from 4 versions of the same logo, but shifted
Mm.
for 1 pixel each.
Yeah, that one I also understood actually. So yeah, that makes total sense. So you need to build it,
Yeah,
and then eventually you kind of skip one characters if you have
yeah,
contracted it like all the 4 steps, and then you skip one and you read from the first one again.
yeah. Because what you do is really you can lay it out in memory so that you have
Yeah.
the fully stretched kind of the normal characters at 0, 4, 8,
Yeah.
12, 16. And by default, you just add to draw a logo, you just add 4. Boom,
Mm.
boom. But to get a stretched together version, you add something like 4.5.
Mm.
So eventually you will go one less, like you might hit 4, 7, and they get to 11. And so you kind of get that effect by just adding numbers. And it's beautiful how simple it is to get a zoom effect like this.
Yeah.
And they can combine it. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's
Hey,
I
cool.
get it. I'm so super excited. I got it.
Yeah. And now we're at 1995. Now
Yeah.
this is, you're extended for 3 years now. So this is, and you can combine this. So this here is from a demo 2023 where the uses the same kind of character repetition technique to get the kind of the full screen effect, and then just draws one character line. It has a bunch of fonts, and it uses the same stretching and technique to get that wobbly, squishy feel. Uh, and if you do it in a full screen way, especially if you do it with high res, let's see here what happens. You see what when it's in the most squished in version, you get that kind of flickering. It gets kind of coarse or rough. It doesn't really look as good as we might want it to do, uh, because you have that granularity of like 8 pixels.
Oh.
You lose pixels every now and then. And the typical way to deal with that is to do something that is called in large scale, 3D graphics techniques. So from starting in the 90s, called mip mapping, is where you have multiple versions of the texture zoomed out, pre-zoomed, and you can select from each of one of them at what point you would like to be. So in this case, we have a full logo, we have a half logo, we have 1/4 logo. We can even go further down to 1/8 logo, and we can create a zoom effect that is really does not have those uh, disturbing granularity effect. You
Mm.
can still see a bit of it here when it's zooming up, but is nowhere near as much as we'd have with having a kind of a fully coarse grained high-res picture as we had before. And you can extend this to high-res as well. So this is from a demo in business. No one can hear you scream. You can see that this logo as it zooms up and as it zooms out, the high-res dithering pattern is still uh, works really well. It does not have any of those kind of, and it's based on that technique that you have multiple versions, but they are smaller and pre-computed uh,
Mm.
at a smaller fashion. So now we have a granularity that we can deal with. Uh, and and you can do more cool things with this. So this is from the demo 30 and 37, where we do a draw unlimited bobs on top of a Graham zoomer. So every bob is drawn with four different copies slightly shifted, which means that we can do that kind of Graham zoom on top of those bobs. This was a world first. I think I don't think anyone's done this, and it's just really really cool. You don't expect it when you see it. It's like wow, and again, a full screen effect like that, and based on those pretty simple principles, where you have a D011 Y stretch where you just select how often you trigger new bad line,
Mm.
and on the X direction you select what characters to show based on a kind of fixed integer uh, multiple between each character. You get that?
Are you consuming all the CPU cycles on the screen for this effect, and then you prepare it when you go outside in the border, or?
No, actually not, because all you need to do on the screen itself is to trigger raster interrupts. So you can do this from a raster interrupt.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be like a fully tightly timed loop for this to
yeah.
work. In this case, it's really a raster interrupt that happens every between two or seven lines
Mm.
to update D011 and D018, D000. That resets a new raster interrupt. So there's plenty of raster time
Mm.
like underneath uh, that code to draw the bobs.
Mm.
And we draw them on one of the screens that aren't shown, so you got a kind of double buffer.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, so excellent question, because those are the effects that we've seen here don't require that tight timing. They work with just a normal raster interrupt, so we can run things behind it. So yeah, so that was the end of trick two.
Mm.
Uh, Now we're getting to trick number three, which is trigger bad lines for n rows, whatever n is, and then we relax for seven. So we trigger bad line here, 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 and that will stretch out the first line, and then we wait for 8 lines. So we trigger next one here. But what happens is we get the X there. So we actually get the Vic chip to read a new character line, a new color line, a new whatever line we'd like to see, a new bitmap, new 8 bitmap pixels coming in like normal, except we're going to stretch out the first line. Uh, and this is something that you typically would do in a tight loop. The first lines are in a tight loop, and then you set another raster interrupt to happen 8 lines further down or 7 lines further down, whatever, because you're you're kind of consuming some cycles there. And with this, so we can do all sorts of things just based on this. And well, let's just look at the first. What happens if we do kind of a basic screen stretch? We get this. The first pixel row of each character line is stretched out as
Mm.
far as we'd like, but only the first. There is no way to stretch the second or the third or anything but the first. Uh, but we can do a lot with that. We can do kind of a very cheap stretcher effect. Here's from OTech People 3. We see how those texts just kind of flash by, and we have a kind of a nice stretchy effect there, but based on this stretching every 8th line. And often this is enough. It
Mm.
looks really nice, it looks really good, and it's cheap. Trigger raster interrupt, do some D011 updates, return from raster interrupt, do again. Uh, 8 lines below. Here's another one from the FairLight from 2025. Again, just stretching every 8th line, meaning that there's no there's very little raster time that's used for this. There's no magic needed. You just need to stretch every 8th line.
Mm.
Uh, so this is, and let's see. Oh, yeah. So this is this was known. Everyone knew you could do this. And then out of the blue came Bitbuster in 1988 in a demo called Party Squeezer. Roll ahead. And showed a bitmap stretcher that stretched a normal bitmap picture every pixel line, not just the first. I was like, wow, how could this be done? And it's insane when you think of at what period in history this was done. This was done before Lee was invented. This was done before people had figured out how to deal with D011 and D018 and D000. This was just from nowhere came this guy, Bitbuster, like a monster genius, figured this out. And I'm going to show you how this works because this is really, really cool. Let's see if I don't know if I have a, yeah. So this is how, if we apply this to the basic text screen, this is actually taken from the demo coder demo. We get something like this. So Bitbuster stretcher on a text screen, it looks like this. I don't think that anyone had done this before this demo, by the way. So this was the original was done back in 1988. It's been a few demos using this technique since then, but not a lot of them. It's really been kind of not forgotten, but really more like never really understood, I think. For me, it took, I saw this in 1988-ish, and I was floored. I had no idea how that was done. And I've been thinking about it back and forth over the years, and now finally it kind of clicked how it was done. And for a few others, it has clicked before. They were smarter than me and did it. There is like a handful of demos using this, but here's how that's how it looks if you do it on a text screen. And here is how it works. So let's see if I can explain this. To the left is just a character. And what we'd like to achieve is a stretched version of this character like this. So we'd like to get pixel row 0 repeated twice, pixel row 1 repeated twice, 2 twice, etc., all the way down.
Mm.
And of course, we do this on one character. We can do it on the full screen. So this is just for illustration. We have it on one character. So that's what we would like to achieve. But the only thing that we can get the hardware to help us with here is to stretch the first pixel. This.
Mm.
So now the question is, how do we take the one that we see in the middle and turn it into the one right next to it, like the lefter, the stretched out version? And here is what Bitbuster realized is that if you have multiple copies of the picture or the font, whatever, that are shifted upwards by increasing number of pixels, like this is the first one step up, 2 steps up, 3 steps up, 4 steps up.
Mm.
You can actually select for each pixel row what pixels to show by selecting these fonts. So we show the first, so there's a gap in the middle of the screen here. This is the final version of this where this will be shown. First line is pixel row 0. That's easy because this is the same. So we select font number 0, the original one, and we do that for the second line too. Now the third line is where it starts to get interesting because now we have, really would like to show pixel row number 2, but we're still effectively at number 0. So what we do is we select the font that has pixel line 2 at place 0. Oh, we show that. That's the one.
Font number 1 then.
Exactly. And the same for the next. And the next, Well, then we're now at the next pixel line, right? So
Oh,
we select font number 2. And we're getting a font number 3, and even font number 4 is squeezed in here. So now we have like the top half of this stretched out character fixed. And now the last 7 rows are when the Vic chip is really just showing the next line. We're not triggering any bad lines or anything, but we need to update the fonts anyway, because we need to kind of unwind ourselves. We are now selected number 3 because we would like to show that pixel line, but it's actually number 1, but it's stretched out. So we wind ourselves back and we can just look at this. And we get a fully stretched out character like that using that trick. And I have no idea how Bitbuster figured this out. I mean, this was like, we were kids playing with our toys. Like,
yeah,
it was,
yeah.
and it was uh, using like a machine code monitor to do all the timing, everything, and was able to work this out and get it to look like that. Incredible. I have no idea how that was done. I am super impressed. Uh, seeing it now, how it actually works. But of course, once you figure it out, you can use it for anything. So here's from the same demo coder demo. We stretch a bitmap logo, and it kind of falls down from the top of the screen too, which is cool because we need to do a line crunch to get it kind of to pull up like that. And
But what about colors? You would need to have. You're not stretching the color registers, and you cannot change the pointers to the color memory here. That's a fixed area. So
yeah,
unlike the screen.
but actually, it just works. The colors just work because we are just stretching out every character line, and
Yeah,
then we get a new character line. So all the colors are they're just work. They just kind of come in
yeah.
to the right place at the right time.
Correct. Oh, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which is incredible.
You're not changing the color memory. It's the same for the
Yeah,
extended characters. Okay. Yeah.
exactly. So it's really just works. It's one of those effects that are once you've figured it out and you can use it, you realize that it's kind of simple. I mean, it's hard. This one is really, really hard to make all the timing work
Mm.
because this one cannot use a raster interrupter, that lacks timing. It has to be cycle perfect.
Mm.
So that's where the hard part is in this, especially. And again, I have no idea how Bitbuster did this because it's not easy to get the timing right, but somehow they did it. So
And you can, your example was 16 pixels, so turning 8 pixels up to a 61, but
right,
there is no limit. You can basically
yeah.
stretch the entire one for, you can have 8 pixels covering the entire screen.
Almost. The problem is that you need to have those fonts now, or
Mm.
versions of the picture.
Oh, so
So
that's the restriction. Okay.
yeah, the further you stretch, the more fonts you need.
Mm.
And you can't have you can have 6 bitmap pictures in memory at the
Mm.
same time
Mm.
because their others are covered by ROMs. So you can't stretch all the way out. You can stretch all the way out with a font because you can use more than 8 fonts.
Mm.
With 8 fonts, you're good. You can do anything. But yes, certainly, uh, there is a restriction on how far you can stretch with this technique.
All
But
right. Yeah, yeah.
there's no
So
restriction.
technical limitation. So that would be the bank where the font is on 1000 and where it's on 9000. You cannot use those because they would collide
Exactly.
with your graphics.
Yep, precisely. You can use those banks for bitmap graphics
Mm.
because there is a big chunk of RAM free for
Yeah.
bitmap there. And you can also use if you're not using the full screen, you can use 6 different. And you kind of put the color memory on the last 3 lines of graphics.
Mm.
They can get away with 6, and you can do a long stretch. This one is actually using 6. That's why it's got that really long and nice stretch. So it's not a full picture. It's just 22 characters high. But you can do more things. So this is I guess the world's first stretched DYCP using this technique, because you just basically stretch anything. And uh, here is another. So this is a really large scroll that gets stretched out in the same fashion. Is a full, like, covers the full screen and just stretches out into the borders up and down.
Hmm.
On this one is also a little extra boasty because it has those raster bars at the top and the bottoms to show that, we didn't need to use much raster time for this. It's efficient. Uh, and in fact, the way that the updating of the stretch itself, in this case, happens in the cycles on the screen that aren't bad lines,
Hmm.
because there are plenty of cycles in there. But you need to time the setting the font register, D018 and D0. But beyond that, you got plenty of raster time in there. So you can do things like updating the sine wave of the stretch. So there isn't much needed outside of this.
Yeah, that's weird. I guess people will use D017 and use a sprite scroller before. That would be
Oh yeah,
similar-ish. But of course,
yeah,
you have a higher resolution here because this is not
yeah,
extended sprites, and you can have more colors than you can have in sprites. So this is more
exactly,
flexible
yeah,
and looks a lot better.
yeah. And I don't think I've seen this type of scroll with this stretcher before, but it was mostly because actually used the stretching technique was not very widely used.
Hmm?
And here's another one using a plasma routine. This is actually using ECM mode that we talked about last time too, to
Hmm?
get a lot of colors and those really tiny uh, single pixel columns that get stretched out. So now we see all the colors. And so this is really drawing a plasma on the screen and stretching that screen out. So it's something like 4, 5, 6-ish uh, character lines that get stretched out onto the full screen. Uh, Here is a color cycling scroll. Again, lame demo, which uh, no one has done this, I think, before either, because the stretching technique was not very widely used. But this one is tricky because it needs to have multiple bitmaps to do the stretching. But to do the color cycling updates, the colors, we need to update all of these places at the same time. Uh, so it gets really complicated to do both.
Hmm?
And that's why this one is really not as large as the others. There's a logo and all that. So because it needs a lot of raster time around the actual stretching.
So the logo
And
looks really nice, but sometimes it's there because you cannot update more parts of the screen. So it fills the screen
exactly.
so to buy you additional CPU cycles for your effect.
Yep. Exactly. So it has a kind of dual purpose thing. But this one though this is an up scroller using the same technique. Uh, sorry, the same stretching, and it gets stretched out really, really long when you see it like this. And it has, if you see this, the logo here, the colors, it's not, this looks like a bit, right? Because it's colors, but it isn't actually. It is text mode. It's just that Soya's logo was done. It did it in a way that made it possible to update the color registers on the screen
Hmm.
to make it look like it was a high-res or a bitmap logo. But this one also uses just surprisingly little raster time, because you can see the raster bars up and down, just to show that, hey, we can get away with this full screen stretching moving effect and have raster time enough to show raster bars. So it's kind of the opposite of showing the logo,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
try to get away with this.
Look, we can even waste cycles because we have so many of them.
Exactly. This is just for show. Uh, and oh, this one is a different. This is a same demo, but it's different effects. This one is stretching, and then it has this FLD gap. as well. So this particular one was like it's not just a, uh, so let me show the picture here. The picture here on the original Bitbuster stretcher was using a picture from the game Hawkeye. And this picture was drawn by the Sarge for his game, Rubicon, which by many was seen as a Hawkeye clone. So it felt fitting that to do a like an homage to the original Bitbuster
Mm.
stretcher, but with a new type of stretcher like this, to use a similar kind of picture. So, but this was an unreleased picture from by the Sarge for Rubicon.
I would imagine that rather few actually caught that reference.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is like we are so in depth here.
That's why we
It's
have FairLight TV. So we have the opportunity of sharing a few of the hidden gems that you should be aware of if you're one of the
yep.
appreciating nerds. Yeah, like
Oh
us.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's so fun to have these kind of
Yeah.
like you just load it into the whatever stuff you do. So this is one, but this is another version of or new type of stretcher that also has the FLD in between. So uh, I guess I'm gonna leave this as an exercise to the reader to figure out how this works, because it's actually really similar but slightly different. It uses D011 in a slightly different way to do this, but
This one, or
yeah, this one.
so it's not
It's
actually FLD. It's or is it?
no, it isn't. It uses a slightly different D011 trick uh, to make it look like FLD without actually doing it. You could probably do it with FLD as well. Uh, it's just that it was easier for me to make it using so it's doing is using an illegal screen mode to cover the areas that would otherwise be stretched out in full pixels. Uh, so the timed code is already there,
Hmm.
but you could probably go and have a look at the code in a monitor and see what it's doing. But it's a kind of a new effect. So uh, with an old picture. Okay, that's it for the first three. Now we're at the fourth, and this is like the real deal. Like
Yeah.
this is the things that so the Gram stretcher is 95, the Bitbuster stretcher and 88. Now we're getting to 2025 territory here, or at least 2024. We get to 2025 soon. But here's just another version of those bad line tricks that haven't actually been explored much for some reason. This feels like something that should have been done in 1988, and everyone had done it to death since, but it hasn't for some reason. So here's the basic trick. The basic trick is that you do a bad line within those 7 lines that we could do, but not always. So every now and then we'll leave 8 lines to let the Vic chip catch up, to get that little X that we see on this far edge of the screen, to make the Vic chip count to the next step of the bitmap counter or the character counter. And if we just do this like this, we just every other bad line would trigger bad line, and we would get this effect on the kind of basic screen. It doesn't look like much, and it isn't much. But we can do cool things with just this technique, just this. So here is from 1337, a color cycling stretcher. So this is an interesting color cycling technique where there are two interleaved color mixed like um, patterns on the screen. And then there is a kind of a little stretching going on as well. And the stretching there is done in the same way as we saw on the basic screen. Every other uh, line is doubled like that every
Mm.
now and then to make it stretch out. And the same is used in the jarring dither stretcher towards the end of 1337 when so the storyline is that things are falling apart. Everything is really, crashing. The missiles are about to hit. And we get to see this guy, the president, getting really jarringly stretched out. And again, this uses the same basic technique, but this one has a bit of a different dithering thing going on as well, uh, using D018 and D011. But basically the same. You trigger bad line, wait for 8 lines, and they start again and trigger new bad lines. So you let the Vic chip catch up with you. You get a slight stretch, and then you can get all the graphics down on the screen. And that leads us to where we started, the Pernod squeezer. So this is done by Pernod design, ex Horizon, ex FairLight, who released this in 2025. So I had actually seen him show this at 1 year before, Fjällåta 2024. I was using a different picture, but and I don't remember if he showed it to me or if I just happened to glance over and saw it. But it was the moment I saw it, I figured out what he was doing. And it was something that I just hadn't thought of myself. I've
Mm.
been doing all these D011 things for like forever, but I hadn't realized this that he had realized. And it was incredible. Uh, and of course, I was so thrilled to see that he finally released this because that meant that I could release stuff as well, kind of building on his idea without me kind of trying to steal his thunder. So that was really Pernod that came to the big insight that essentially you can do this. And the way it works this is that it uses that same technique of triggering new bad lines and then relaxing for 8 pixel lines to let the Vic chip catch up. And what you do is you stretch out. So I have a picture here. It bad line, and you trigger a new bad line, and you set a new graphic bank and bitmap picture pointer. So you show first up to 7 pixels of one bitmap, 7 pixels of another, 7, 7, 7. You do it 6 times.
Mhm.
And the sixth one, you need to show 8 pixels. And then you start over again. And if we do this and then we see now on the X going on my graphics here, that's what happens when we get that Vic chip reading out a new counter. And if we do this just on the basic screen, it looks like this. You stretch out every line up until 6 times, or not really 6 times, because we have 7 pixels per line to show there. And then the eighth line is so that means that every line is stretched out to 5 times 7, which is 35 plus 8, so 43 pixels per character line.
Mm.
And we have uh, six bitmap pictures that are 22 characters high because we need the last 3 to store the colors, which means that we can have something like 902 or 903, some odd number of lines on the picture. It's a really, really high picture using the entire memory.
Mm.
The only drawback is that the D800 colors are the same for every chunk of picture.
Mm.
All these have to use the same D800 colors because you can't bank them to another place. They are where they are. That's the only drawback. But you can do a full screen stretch, squeeze with zero effort once you've set up all of the raster code to this. So here, what it looks like when we change the font. So we have different fonts on every of these kind of stretched out. So what you do then is you do a line crunch at the top to make it kind of squeeze up together. And then you can do another thing. You can add an FLD. So here's it's a version of the Pernod squeezer with an FLD, which means that we can also control where on the screen this whole thing happens to start.
Mm.
So you can see it kind of bounces out. But what this gives us is 903 something pixel lines from top to bottom, where we can select freely what part to show. By doing an FLD, we can select, really freely, or line crunch, what parts show. And this is what the bitmap squisher and the trip by us, by FairLight uses to get this apparently impossible effect. It's clearly this is a bitmap logo. There are way too many colors for it to be anything else,
Mm.
and it just freely squishes in two directions, two dimensions, X and Y. There is no apparent connection to the two. There is actually no connection. They are completely
Mm.
free. Uh, and this one too, again, you can see very clearly how this is a bitmap picture with all the colors on the kind of the spheres on the side, all the letters.
Mm.
And the way this works is essentially the same technique as the Pernod squeezer, but we use the fact that we can show freely select what parts of the picture to show. And instead of having one large picture, we have 8 small pictures where this logo is in 8 different uh, compressed in 8 different versions
Mm.
in the X direction. We select freely which one of them to display to get the X stretch. And then we use the kind of the standard, if you will, Pernod squeezer to make the Y stretch, which means that they are completely free,
Mm.
completely orthogonal. There is no connection to the two. And that's how you do new effects in 2025. That never been done before.
Whew.
Ah,
I need to watch this 5 times or more to kind of catch the gory details here. But
oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, there was more coming here. So
No, this is just the recap. So those are the 4 techniques that we had at our disposal. The repeated character lines, that's an old school thing that's been done since the 80s.
mm.
But we can do new things with it because it's really the base technique is there, but I don't think it's really explored to its full extent with how you select the various fonts and characters on the screen. The second one being the trigger bad line every nth row. That's the basis of the Graham Zoomer. Uh, been explored a lot. I think there's lots to do there. Uh, Third one, trigger bad line for n rows, relax for 7 rows. The real killer application of that is the Bitbuster stretcher.
Mm.
Extremely cool. Has been done since the 80s, of course, but hasn't been done much in the meanwhile. So there is more to do there as well. And then we have number 4, which is kind of the cool one. Trigger bad line every n row, but not always.
Mm.
And you get the Pernod squeezer. You can get those squishy bitmap effects and probably more. Uh, Hopefully, people will get excited by this video and say, "Hey, I can do that," and actually go and do something cool I don't have ever thought of before
That's
because it's there. It's out
fantastic.
there.
I, I'm. I also have to be a bit humbly impressed by the fact that the emulators are handling this gracefully.
Well, the cool thing with those effects that we've seen here is that they don't actually need much of the hardware. It's not like a new hardware trick.
Huh?
It's not like a cycle perfected, you know, uh, delay of one cycle to set to ghost bite and
Mm.
ECM mode to get. There's nothing like that. It's really kind of just the basic operation of the VIC chip,
Mm.
except you need to select fonts and bitmaps in a clever order,
Mm.
and you get new things that people haven't done before. So it's interesting how these effects were coming out now.
Mm.
Clearly, people haven't done this before, but they've done similar things, but not just these guys, these ones. Uh, and It's not even based on like super new hardware tricks or
Mm.
anything like that. It's really just an insight that for some reason skipped us in the past. I mean, it was always there,
So this was
but
basically reinvented. It was there, and it was for us to learn and to master and to bring forward and combine with other things. But not all
yeah.
good things in the past are remembered and utilized today. So I guess these are a few of
Well,
those, or at least the first three.
yeah. Well, yeah, because the fourth one was really a new, I think, insight
Mm.
that for some reason had skipped us in the past. It's obvious in hindsight. So from the egg situation,
Mm.
where once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. But Yeah, no one has seen it before.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Was that it?
So that's it. This is it. Now you know everything. Hopefully, this has been from 1992 to 2025 and what? At about over an hour, just over an hour.
So I need to be really clear that I seem to stop learning by the spring of 1992. It couldn't be late in 1992 because then I would have caught a few of those. Adam, thank you so much for this. I don't know if you heard it, but there have been a bit of an audio glitch here, and that's things that I'm sure people could sort of live with because the content was high quality stuff, and it's this being sort of a follow-up on the previous one where we went through the more old school stuff. So thank you so much for showing the amazing things you can do with the 6502 or 6510 in this case, and the magnificent VIC-2 chip by Albert Carpentier. This is cool stuff.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
FairLight.